Hello, everybody. My name is Bob, and these are the do's and don'ts of making Texas red chili. Now, you may say to yourself, "So, this is not Bob's usual gameplay content. That's just how it is. You got to roll with whatever is going through my brain at the time, and this is what's going through my brain." In fact, the platonic ideal of Texas red chili has somehow been injected directly into my cerebral cortex, and I have to express that platonic ideal somehow. So, but mostly, uh, this is going to be a very opinionated list. It's an extremely opinionated list, but it's mostly for myself because I'm about to begin my chili experiments, and so it's going to be a standard. These do's and don'ts are going to be the standard by which I judge myself. Um, that all that's out of the way. Um, One thing that should be also be gotten out of the way immediately is not all chili is Texas red. There are many different kinds of chilies. Some of them may be edible. Some of them may even be good. May even be tasty. That's not what we're about. We're about Texas red. So these are the do's and don'ts of Texas red chili. First rule: never use ground beef. Never. Don't even use chili grind beef, although using chili grind beef is better than using ground beef, but neither one of those is good. Um, Now, you may tell me, hey, my grandmother made the best chili in the world, and it used ground beef, man. Well, yeah, I'm sorry, but your chili will never reach its full potential if you use ground beef. Um, you need to use cube beef, about 1 inch cube. So that's the first rule. Second rule is the meat cubes are to be browned, spaced out in a pan with tallow, beef tallow, or bacon fat. Dumping a bunch of ground beef into a pan and letting it steam itself is not browning it. Um, it has the cubes have to brown. Um, the way I do it is dust a little flour or masa harina on the cubes. The cubes need to be quite dry, so wipe them off with a paper towel, and then space them out on a large pan or a Dutch oven and brown them. That is the way to brown it. Dumping a whole bunch of ground beef into a pan to steam itself to death is not browning, and it should be browned. Um, the optimal fat for browning is tallow, beef tallow. Bacon fat is a reasonable alternative. No vegetable oil. Um, Texas red chili is made with beef. Now, there could be an argument to be made for throwing in a little goat meat if you have goat meat. Lots of people would have, unless you're living in a Muslim neighborhood, you may have a hard time finding uh, goat meat from mature goats rather than cabrito from baby goats. But goat meat might be a reasonable additive. Otherwise, just beef. No pork, no chicken. Now, the San Antonio Chili Queens, which are usually considered the one of the origins for Texas red chili, they did use pork, and they were wrong to do so. Chili is made with beef. Also, the tougher the meat, the better the chili. The way it works with animals like cattle is you have some muscles that get a lot of work, like in the chest. A lot of those chest muscles get a lot of work. Also, the shanks, the legs, they get a lot of work. And those parts of the animal are going to be very tough, and they're also going to be very tasty. They're also going to be full of connective tissue, which will break down into the collagen in them will break down and make your chili more jelly-like instead of brothy. Because we're going to get that in a minute, but brothy is not a thing you want in chili. So tougher the meat, the better. Ideally, chuck, shanks, and maybe oxtails. And I was saying just a minute ago, chili never has soupy or brothy components. It should not have. There should not be any chili broth. There should not be any chili soup to it. Uh, the runniest part of your chili should be no more runny than a thin pudding. If you see anything that looks like broth, you're doing it wrong. Part of the reason why you may have more broth is one, the kind of meat you're using, or if you're using ground beef. Two, if you've added too much liquid to the pepper puree, that could be a cause. If you added too much deglazing liquid to deglaze the pan, that could be a cause. But basically, if you see broth, anything that looks like broth or soup, you're doing it wrong. Another thing is chili powder, which is not used. The reason why chili powder is not used is that chili powder is smashed into a fine powder, as the name suggests, which means that it is immediately exposed to maximum oxidation and maximum flavor loss. We don't do that in the ideal platonic Texas red chili. Whole dried anchos, whole dried guajillos, and possibly chili Pequin are used, which are steeped in boiling water and blended into a puree, which is used as soon as possible. Now, a word about chili Pequin. They're very tiny little peppers, about the size of the end of your pinky, and they are very, very hot. So if you don't like very, very hot chili, which I'm not that big on it, maybe not use chili Pequins. What's in their favor is the chili Pequins are the only pepper plant that's native to Texas, and in fact it grows wild in South Texas. And so, arguably, it back when the cowboys were doing it, they probably used some chili Pequin, and maybe a lot of chili Pequin, but it is very, very hot. Chili Pequin is also expensive because it can't be cultivated. Mostly, it's just gathered in the wild, or it can't be easily cultivated. It can be cultivated, but it's a pain in the ass, from what I understand. So usually, if you find chili Pequin, go to Amazon or whatever, that's going to be a lot more expensive than the other kinds of peppers you're going to use. So, but take both those things into account. Chili must be cooked at a low and constant temperature below 200 degrees. And that the optimal way that you're going to be able to do that is in ironware, like a Dutch oven, in an oven for a very long time. Now, you can bring it to a boil to start with. That's fine. But afterwards, it needs to stay below 200 degrees and stay there for a long, long time. What happens if it gets above 200 degrees? That's above the 220 degrees is the boiling point of water, and it's going to toughen up the meat. So you don't need that. Probably you don't even need to boil it to begin with. But boiling it the once is fine because that meat at that point is already tough. It's already real tough. You're trying to get it softer. So after that point, you should put it in a 195 degree oven and leave it there for a real long time. And that's going to give you your optimal breakdown. There are a lot of people who say, I don't want to use a 1-inch cube for chili, maybe a half-inch cube, because it won't cook all the way through and it won't get tender and all that. Well, if you're doing it right, it will get tender. If you're not doing it right, then you might need to use half-inch chunks. But the ideal is 1-inch chunks, low and slow for a very long time, and you do it in the oven because the oven has better temperature regulation than a stovetop. Now, tomatoes are actually quite controversial in the world of Texas Red. There are a lot of people, a lot of purists who would say no form of tomato should ever be used. I use tomato paste. I use it in moderation, like 3 tablespoons for 6 quarts. Tomato chunks, tomato sauce, tomato juice should never be used. This is not vegetable soup. You may use tomato paste just like you would in any kind of beef stew, in moderation. No chunks, no sauce, no juice. There's even some controversy about whether onions have a role, and I do believe they do. I do believe that onions not only may be used, but should be used. garlic must be used. Uh, if beef broth is used at all, it should only be to deglaze the pan in very small quantities. So in other words, after you're done browning your beef cubes in batches, making sure not to crowd the pan so that the meat doesn't steam itself. After you're done browning off all the meat in small batches, there's a lot of what they call fond, dried meaty juices at the bottom of the pan, and you want to loosen that up. And so you can use a very small quantity, like a cup, of beef broth to do that. And ideally, most of that beef broth is going to evaporate. You can also use wine, like again 1 cup for like a 7-quart Dutch oven. But most of it should be evaporated by the time you're done with it. Also, chili should not be served on the same day that it's made. Why that is, I'm not sure. It's one of the mysteries of chili, but it's never going to be as good on the first day as it is on the second day. So just cut to the chase. Go ahead and after it cools down, you throw it in the refrigerator. You have it the next day, because it's never going to be as good the first day. Why exactly that is, what the physics and chemistry of that is, I don't know, but I know it's true. Also, fresh peppers have no place in chili, nor do any other kinds of vegetable besides onions, a small amount of tomato paste, garlic, and dried chilies. Dried ancho and guajillo chilies, and chili Pequin if you're looking for a very hot flavor. So that's pretty much it. It should be in cubes. It shouldn't be runny. Shouldn't be juicy. It shouldn't have a bunch of vegetables in it. Texas red does not have beans in it. It doesn't mean that every kind of chili that has beans in it is awful. We're not talking about that. We're talking about what Texas red is. Texas red does not have beans. Now, if you want to have beans with your chili, what you don't want to do is actually cook it in the chili, because chili is the wrong chemical environment for cooking beans in. Cook the beans separately, and then if you want to pour the chili over the beans, you do you. But what definitely should never happen is beans in the chili, and that's not definitely not Texas red to have beans anything like in your chili. So what happens next is in a few weeks, I've got some preparation work to do first. In a few weeks, I'm going to make my first of my chili experiments. The chili experiments are an attempt to get me as close as possible to the platonic ideal of Texas red chili that's in my head. So I will post some data about that when it happens. And that's all for right now. Until next time. And again, this was an extremely opinionated list, but I'm essentially doing it for my own purposes so that I can be held to the same standards that I'm putting out there for everybody else. And again, this only applies to Texas red chili. There are all kinds of chilies in the world, and some of them may be good, some of them may be awful. But I am expressly concerning myself with Texas red. So anyway, that's all for right now. Until next time, hasta la vista. Adios!